Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video where I give you the juicy nuggets, the extra context and information to this war that is ongoing in Ukraine. Where shall I start today? Well, let's go and have a look at Belgium again. So I've mentioned Belgium 3 days in a row now, just because why not? I said Oryx, who are collating the amount of equipment that is both lost, captured, and damaged, but also equipment that is donated to Ukraine. And they released an article about how Belgium hasn't really done an awful lot in terms of military equipment. And then yesterday, the Belgian Prime Minister, or the Belgian head, visited Kiev and Zelensky, and now things are said, or you're going to start seeing things coming out now, and you're starting to see exactly that. So where Belgium has historically had quite an underfunded army, they do have quite a big defence company, one of the major ones in Europe, and they do have other areas that they can tap into. And here, that's what we are seeing. Belgium to send 10 underwater drones and mobile laboratories to Ukraine. Laboratories can be delivered within 3 weeks and deployed near a place where chemical or nuclear incidents could happen. Underwater drones produced by Belgian ECA Robotics will be delivered by the end of May. So that is obviously more of a long-term thing. That's a 6-month job there, but it's still good to see, Belgium stepping up. Fantastic. Luxembourg, who have already given a bunch of Humvees or promised a bunch of Humvees. They obviously have a very small armed forces, being one of the smallest nations, or the smallest nation in Europe. Luxembourg donates 6 Czech-made drones to Ukraine. Luxembourg has donated 6 Promoco UAV 150 drones to Ukraine's military, according to the Ukrainian Military Center think tank, citing Luxembourg's defense ministry. And here it says on November the 21st, they promise a bunch of Humvees to strengthen Ukraine in exercising its right to self-defense. So that's fantastic, Luxembourg. Now, I showed you yesterday this great footage of a gunner in a Mi-24 cockpit, where, a superbly bearded pilot or crew member on this helicopter who was showing off basically really decent overalls and helmets, really sort of modern equipment. Some firing off some stuff there, some rounds of something, and the idea that note the Western crew helmets and modern overalls, hopefully offering improved protection to the crew. Brackets, Come Back Alive are one organisation that has been working to improve helicopter crew survivability. So I said that's really cool that there's an organisation giving that. And literally the next day, I see this, which is a few months back, we helped bring a helicopter pilot's helmet to Ukraine. Just heard that it saved the pilot during the emergency landing. Good deeds come back alive. So this sounds like it is indeed come back alive. And there is a helmet that looks very much like the one you just saw the guy wearing, except this one's in slightly worse condition because it's been involved in an emergency landing of some sort. So, as you know, pretty serendipitous that I make that I put this video on my own video, and then this further bit of information popped up. You may have heard that the Belarusian Foreign Minister Vladimir Maki, who was 64, suddenly died yesterday. No details were given about his death. No cause of death is as yet unknown, as far as I'm aware. Lots of people saying different things. Ukrinform, who's obviously very pro-Ukrainian, but it's interesting to see what the Ukrainians are making of this, are saying that, referring to the Robert Lansing Institute, a US-based think tank, the Kremlin is plotting to liquidate Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko in an attempt to plant a puppet successor and completely seize control of the Belarusian army, to drag it into the direct participation in hostilities on Ukrainian soil and deprive Belarus of what's left of its sovereignty. And this is the sort of idea, I don't know whether it's more of a conspiracy theory or whether this is indeed evidence of this, that the Russians are trying to get Belarus to completely support the war in direct fashion, rather than just providing some of the equipment to the Russians and providing their land for the Russians to use as a springboard, but actually to use their army to help invade. Now, in order to do that, Lukashenko knows which side his bread is buttered. So he knows that he can't annoy Putin, so he just does just enough to keep Putin on side, but also knows that if he gets involved, Belarus will be absolutely screwed by sanctions even more than they are, and will be, international pariahs as well. And so he's trying to play both sides as much as he can. And then suddenly his foreign minister, who's broadly in support of the war, in support of the Russian party line, if you like, suddenly dies. And you're thinking, okay, are they trying to get people in? Is this A, is this the Russians? And B, if it is, what are their intentions here? And is it trying to get in really pro-Russian sort of puppet leaders in position across the government so that they can basically use Belarus as basically their own army and their own sort of pool of resources? Interesting to see where that will lead. Something else that's pertinent to, well, to us all actually, but to the Ukraine-Russia war, which is the supply of oil. And given that the supply of oil, globally speaking, has been really impacted by sanctions on Russia, but Russia can still supply to other parts of the world, India, China, Asia, and so on and so forth. This means that the West has to go elsewhere to find their oil. So you're going from like Russia, who have terrible human rights and sort of moral political pedigree, and you're going to places like Saudi Arabia and the places in the Middle East that are like just as bad on the human rights records and involved in wars with Yemen. And you're thinking, this is kind of morally problematic because you're saying, oh, we're not going to do business with these guys. They're terrible. So we're going to go and do more business with these guys who are equally as terrible. You're like, there's an issue there. And America has these sort of strategic reserves that they're trying to release because the more that you squeeze the supply, the higher the cost goes. So anything that is lacking in terms of, the marketplace will become more expensive. If you can control the supply of that thing. And I talked about diamonds last time. It's not that diamonds are actually majorly rare. It's just that you can control the supply of them. And of course, if you can't get hold of them very easily, then they become really sought after or much more expensive. The same on anything on eBay that's particularly in demand will command a higher price if the supply is low. And you get equilibrium where supply meets demand. Here at the moment, we're demanding lots, but the supply isn't there. So the price is going up, and everyone's feeling that in the cost of living crisis at the pump, heating the homes, all this kind of stuff. So America have been trying to release their strategic reserves to deal with that, but of course that's not a great long-term solution. And here is something that I think possibly should have been happening anyway, which is US providing Chevron limited authorization to pump oil in Venezuela. So Venezuela, for some years now, has been, when Hugo Chavez was there, not a great friend of America. America's had a long history of getting involved in the democratic process of many other countries around the world. I don't want to be too controversial. I know there's a lot of American viewers here, but an interesting documentary to go and watch is John Pilger's War on Democracy. It's a good decade or so old now, probably 15 years old now. But it's a really good documentary to show you how America has, in a clandestine fashion, like CIA and whatnot, got involved, particularly in South America. And often when there have been actually democratic processes going on there, and they're obviously trying to say, hey, we are fighting for democratic values around the world, and at the same time unseating democratically elected governments that they just don't happen to like. Now, don't have a go at me, Americans, if you disagree with this, but actually go and look at the history of South America particularly. Anyway, Venezuela has, in its sort of march to the left in terms of Chavez and Maduro and these governments, America wanted them to be more right wing, so have more control over their, I suppose, natural resources, have sort of sanctioned Venezuela. And now it seems that they've agreed that lifting some of those sanctions might alleviate the pressures on the oil market. So that's just from a geopolitical point of view, that's really significant, actually. So see how that goes. And to go completely left field from there, I just thought this is very cool. It doesn't actually have anything to do with Ukraine per se, or the war, but could this be where war goes? And you can imagine that. So someone was saying, I think it was Trent Telenko, maybe, was saying that this would require a completely different type of armament to take it on. So something like a Stinger, it's about having the time to get that, and I don't know, just as new weapons and modes of transport are developed, obviously ways of taking them out of the game need to be developed. So this would be, I think the idea was that this was quite hard for electronic warfare to deal with for some reason, but I need to look into the details. Anyway, just have a look at this. It's pretty darn cool. This is a Japanese one, designed, I think, but I gather one is due to be on sale this is due to be on sale in America, but in sometime in 2023, so very soon. And wow, it's obviously a big drone with a seat, so it's a flying bike. Works on the same principle as your quadcopters, pretty much, except you are in control of it on top of it. You can tell there's a lot of strain in those arms. This might have to pretty much get used to riding that before it looks a lot more natural.
I mean, it's awesome. It was exhilarating. I mean, it's not vicious, right? It's comfortable. I mean, it was really comfortable taking off and landing. So there's no like jerky jerk. It's literally very, very smooth, and I can't wait for the future. I'm so excited.
Definitely looks cool. Created by Japanese startup Airwinds. The bike is already on sale in Japan, so you can literally buy that now. And as I say, the smaller version is slated for a US release in 2023. With an estimated price tag of $777,000, you can bet your bottom dollar there'll be people in the US with that kind of money that will be lapping that up, because, man, if I was a billionaire, I would be getting a few of them and inviting my mates around for a bit of drone fun and games. I guess the idea of bringing it up is, what would war look like with these, on the front line? I mean, how would you use these? How could this be a useful bit of kit, or is it more sort of gimmickry and a gadget that won't have much practical use on the front line? Or, in the future when we have conflicts, will there be just all sorts of stuff like this? Will the ability to travel forwards and backwards and over all terrain, but above the terrain and even higher up, be a massive advantage? You can't get bogged down in literally in boggy ground, in the water, in the mud. And this is a way around that. It's interesting to think about these things. I don't know, let me know your thoughts down below. Right, I talked to you yesterday about buggies, and then suddenly it's the old, what is a fallacy? Is suddenly you see them everywhere, and there's talk about them everywhere. Or not the fallacy, that kind of heuristic, that mental thing where you buy a red car and suddenly you notice red cars everywhere, or whatever. On one of the directions of the front, a Ukrainian buggy with an anti-tank guided missile system. I had to apologise yesterday. I said it was a heavy machine gun on the back of a June buggy. And it wasn't. It was a recoilless gun which could fire like high explosives and whatnot. So it wasn't a heavy machine gun. This is the Fagot working on its tracks. So this is an ATGM anti-tank sort of weapon. But here's yet another buggy. Let's see it in action. I guess the great thing about this is the high mobility that it has. So that and it's pretty stable on the back. It's sitting on the road. So I presume this is actually genuinely firing against something rather than being on a training ground, but maybe not, I don't know. And there it is. The idea is that you can shoot and scoot with consummate ease with that. And someone posted this video. I won't play it because it's 11 minutes long, but this is Russia can't fight off Ukraine's Mad Max vehicles. So this is all about these technicals. These kind of vehicles are called technicals. They've got a fairly long history, or at least since the kind of Afghanistan war and whatnot, where you started bolting on guns and whatnot to the back of pickup trucks and things,
or shipped into the country. Now, in scenes resembling.
Okay, and here they do a whole big video, the military show, about these kind of vehicles, technicals, and the different types of technicals you can get, down to, from tractors being adapted to dune buggies to old Soviet cars to camper vans to, a whole bunch of different things, having their various usages, and how Ukraine have really taken to this, and that they've got a lot of workshops working around the country on these bits of kit. And you can see particularly, so look at that. It's just, you wonder why they bother putting on a bag of that. But particularly these pickup trucks or utes, if you're from down under, utility vehicles, and especially the Mitsubishi L200. So there's a lot of talk about L200s, also Rangers and Ford Rangers and Toyota Hilux and whatnot. And they have, various different uses. So sometimes they can put these old Soviet mortars on the back, that again you can just fire off some shells, do some damage, and then shoot off again afterwards. And it's like, okay, we don't need to be given a whole bunch of really expensive military equipment from other countries. We can just take some of this old artillery or these old pieces of offensive equipment and put them on the back of goodness knows what. Here we've got a BMW, like a souped up BMW with a nice bit of paint job done to it, with a heavy machine gun put on the back. It's just like insane. So technicals, there's an interesting history of technicals, which is, I'll put this video in the description and you can check it out. It's well worth watching. Anyway, just on the back of that, then this when I watched that, it's like, okay, I'm going to link this with Ukraine the latest, because this segment on Ukraine the latest was brilliant, and I'm not going to play you at all because actually it's about 10 minutes worth of interview. But here's a guy, I don't know his name. I think he's actually kind of anonymous here, and I think they've done some voice alteration on him. So obviously, if you're working a lot in Ukraine and the Russians are onto you, you don't want to be well known, right? And you want to be as careful as possible. But here's a British guy. Just the background is, I think he was in Ukraine at the outbreak of the war, and then he started helping by getting cigarettes and medicine to people on the front line or nearby in like Bucha or wherever he was in Kyiv, and so helping in that way. And then he woke up one day and said, "I've got to do something more than this. This is bigger than me getting cigarettes to soldiers to give them the short-term boost of happiness. I've got to start doing something proper." And this is where I'll play the part near the beginning of the narrative where he talks about, okay, I'm going to start this this bigger organization or set up, or at least at the beginning he didn't really know what it was going to be, but it's like, get some money together to do something a little bit more meaningful. And we'll pick it up there.
And so I suppose at that point I really started to think about, this isn't just about medication and cigarettes. This is going to have to be something more serious. And I woke up the next morning to be astounded by the fact that overnight my 8 friends had talked to their friends, who talked to their friends, who talked to their friends, and I already had £15,000 sat in my bank account. And then, part of that, for example, was, donated by a businessman in his 80s who I had never met before, who was a friend of a friend of a friend, who called me up gleefully that morning to say that the bank had stopped his transaction, and he'd called them up and said, why? And they said, well, we're worried you're sending it to a strange account. And he said, yes, it's Molotov cocktails in Kyiv. And the bank manager said, excellent, sir, we'll make it an extra speedy payment.
Absolutely love that. Just like, the typical thing when you try and move money or pay for something that the banks aren't expecting or not expecting, so they put a hold on it, and then you've got to phone them up and say, no, that was me, and they're all for security. So that happens with the bank, and they say that you're trying to move this money, quite a lot of money, to an account we don't know. Yeah, it's because I want them to make a load of Molotov cocktails so they can blow up the Russians. Oh yeah, fine. We'll put that. We'll get that speedily across. And it's kind of that bringing, the idea of people coming together for a common goal and recognizing, the situation that Ukraine was in. Absolutely love that. And then I'm just going to skip through to next part to just continue this a little bit.
You've been giving to the soldiers. What kind of supplies, in general terms, do you give them?
We particularly focus on things that are advantageous to get from the UK. So all of our cargo, for example, is driven down from the UK to the front directly. always in Mitsubishi L200s, which are incredibly popular in this war. They are the pickup of choice for Ukrainians.
And that's what made me think about this, because he was talking about the L200s being good, and they're the vehicle of choice to turn into technicals, as you will find out.
Soldiers. And we always buy them sort of second hand for a few £1,000s, mostly from farmers in sort of rural counties of England, the north and Devon and Cornwall and so on. And they're incredibly popular in Ukraine because not only they're very cheap, but they're also right-hand drive, which inexplicably is extremely popular.
And it's not inexplicably, because he's just about to go and explain why this is the case. So right-hand drive, for those who don't know, I'm sure you all know that in Britain we drive on the other side of the road, and our vehicles to most of the Europe, ex-colonial sort of countries that we've had something to do with, and Japan for interesting reasons, you can go and look it up, drive on the left as well, but which means that the driving seat is on the right, so right-hand drive. Whereas on the continent, in Europe and in Ukraine, they'll have left-hand drive vehicles. So why is it that actually right-hand drive vehicles are popular in Ukraine? Why is it they actually want these right-hand drive L200s?
The reason they're so keen on this is because the Russians, whenever they ambush, they always first shoot at the driver. And obviously, that means that they shoot an empty passenger seat. The driver can get out of the ambush as quickly as possible. And
genius. So imagine being a Russian, taking out the driver's side on the left, right, and you're absolutely hammering it, and this vehicle still carries on driving, as if like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Yeah, it's because it is right-hand drive.
So far, touch wood, we've had this a couple of times where the passenger seat, part of the windscreen, has been completely destroyed, but no one's actually been hurt. So we have one car we delivered in April, which has been shot up now twice. It's been repaired, and it's been operating since August with a multiple rocket launch system on the back of the loading bay in Kherson province. I think we also take a lot of army surplus kits. So we get very good value for Xiaomi kit. So Arctic Warfare sleeping bags we're getting for about £20. I think we get probably better value equipment than certainly any other organisation I've seen operating in Ukraine. And we have a very sort of agile system in the sense that 5 days before the delivery is expected in your trench, we can still change what goes into the vehicle. So soldiers can order things, and it's more or less like a slightly slow Amazon service.
So this is amazing. So they've actually got it set up so they are delivering stuff to the trenches. It's like, you've got an order for stuff. Oh, we're really low on electric heaters. We're really low on, something to sleeping bags, Arctic sleeping bags. We're really low on whatever it is. And like, these guys then get that order in and get it to the trench through the setup that they've now, been working on for 8 months. And it's working. It's really successful. And then you think, so it's all about like saying, is this a competitive advantage for Ukraine over Russia? So does Russia have anything similar to this? And yeah, there are people who are buying Russians stuff. You see this quite often as the Russians try and like throw the stuff on social media saying, look, we're getting our guys drones as well. But of course, they've got very few people probably doing that, I think, compared to the range of people working to help Ukraine. Because at the end of the day, everyone loves an underdog. And when you have an invading force that is obviously the oppressor, people are naturally going to feel sympathy and empathy for those being oppressed. And just makes you want to do all that you can to support that. It's the underdog mentality. When you watch a football game in the World Cup, you're always wanting the minnows to beat the bigger teams. It's just how we often work. And so I think there's going to be many more people doing this for Ukraine rather than the other way around. I mean, I can't see any other nations getting a set of volunteers to go out to the Donbass and work in the voluntary sector, setting up logistic networks to supply Russian troops with this kind of stuff on their front line. It's not going to happen.
We often literally ask them to send Amazon links so that we can get the stuff for them. And to give you a sense of the agility you get, we delivered an L200 at lunchtime into Kharkiv Oblast in September, which by the evening was being photographed in the encirclement of Liman. So it's the first Russian city to fall, I think, since 1942, depending on your categorization. So we tend to...
It's amazing. Just we get it to them lunchtime. By the evening, it's on the front line doing, liberating a city.
We take things that we see as sort of force multiplier kit. So there was a very strange period in April, May, where we had a lot of demand for sort of Halford's car battery adapters because Special Forces units needed them to recharge their...
Halford's is just like your general car, bicycle shop in the UK, generic high street or like retail park shop that does things like car batteries or car battery recharges.
...laws, because the sighting systems run out of charge before they get to fire them. We sent 1,500 lithium batteries for like long-range drones to the Ukrainians, developing for specific operations. We take a lot of specialist drone parts that are only made in the UK.
Just in case you missed that, the battery rechargers for the N-Lords, when they start running low on battery, to give their sighting systems a bit of a recharging boost, and they just need a lot of battery recharges to do that.
There's a big community here for that, but also we've made a lot of connections through the funds that have helped a lot. So one of our donors put us in touch with the oldest supplier of Autel drones in Europe, and he's been giving us thermal drones at cost, which he's then been painting for us with camouflage and so on. We managed to get in touch. We managed to set up prosthetics companies, mine clearance organizations, all sorts of things. And we got the sort of mechanic in the UK who so far has managed to check every vehicle that's gone out. And we have, touch wood, had 0 breakdowns en route.
You've mentioned a few times that you've been to the front. You've seen some of this war really firsthand. What struck you from your experiences there?
This is I'm going to just let you listen to the answer to this question because I think it's really interesting. But that was all about the sort of stuff that they provide, and this is about his experiences of the mentality of the Ukrainians.
I think we're all quite well versed in the sort of damage and the bravery that's being shown out there. I think all your listeners, you've done an excellent job of getting that across. I think one of the things that I haven't seen much in journalism is writing about the sort of remarkable sort of humour and optimism that particularly soldiers still have, despite these very sort of brutalising conditions. It's quite dark humour, but it's strangely optimistic, and I constantly feel slightly ashamed of myself for feeling down about this war when I spend time with soldiers. I think we've all seen Ukrainian resilience. So from day one, I assumed that the Ukrainian army would be, kneecapped basically by, the Russian Air Force and electronic warfare systems. And actually, I've been proved completely wrong. And I would say it goes down from the strategic level right to the individual soldiers. The ability for Ukrainians to put, to have I saw crossroads in Kiev that had been hit by a Russian missile was patched up by the next morning. I saw it for myself. It's their ability to maintain a semblance of normality is quite extraordinary. Funnily enough, I got tickets to the Kiev Opera, which they've somehow managed to reopen in the middle of the Iranian drone strikes. And I was very gratified to see that it was pretty much entirely booked out for La Traviata. I went along and sort of squeezed into the back. And final act, the third act, was sort of prematurely ended by an Iranian drone. And there was sort of the two lovers still holding each other in their arms and singing when the curtain had to come down. And there was a sort of standing ovation before they all very calmly evacuated. Their ability to sort of maintain this sort of element of civilization in the face of all this barbarism is very impressive. But I'd say the other thing that's perhaps surprising is the sort of enduring popularity of the UK specifically.
Okay, and we'll leave it there. But I thought that was really interesting how, the humour and the strength to continue on with a sense of normalcy is something that I think we've all heard stories of, but he's like, it's not actually reported enough in the news. I think the kind of ingenuity in like getting things back to normal has, but possibly I think it's interesting about the humor of the troops on the front who have seen and experienced such horrors. Obviously, it's a kind of needs must. You need to keep going, and dark humor gallows humor is a way of doing that. And he's obviously seen a lot of that. I just thought it was an interesting interview, and I think you guys would benefit from that. And it kind of links back to the technicals, and there's some discussion about whether this is something that Ukraine is benefiting from in a way that Russia isn't. And I think when you're looking at public opinion it tells you something. And when you're looking at capability going forwards in terms of, winter gear, getting that not only directly from countries in their donations, but also through organizations like the one that this guy is using. And just to let you know that his name isn't given, but his Ukraine.equipment@gmail.com is how to get a hold of them, for so that if you ever wanted to help them do things like that's who it is. Ukraine.equipment@gmail.com. Anyway, there you go. I hope that was useful for you and interesting. Please like, subscribe, share, pop along to uasupporter.com/ATP. And if you buy any of this stuff, like, I don't know, duffel bag, you can show your support for Ukraine, and also I get a little bit of commission on my channel, so it's really, really appreciated. Also, I do have some books to pimp out to you guys. I've written, I don't know, probably 20 books these days, but fiction books, which are probably more applicable rather than philosophy. Metamorphosis, so Survival of the Fittest, Metamorphosis, and Survival of the Fittest Adaptation is my series about a dystopian future, and trying to piece back together society and whatnot. Go and check that out. Good books, got great reviews, and that would really help me out as well. Or there's always, PayPal, buy me a coffee, YouTube, thanks, and all that. But just watching this and putting your brilliant comments, you're such an amazing bunch of commenters, and I really have to thank you for that. Anyway, toodle pips, and I'll catch you tomorrow for a Frontline update.